I'm here to talk about my new book, Homeless: Narratives from the Streets. The rationale for this book sort of came out of my dissertation research from 2014. And what I was concerned about was that for the last 50 years under our current welfare system, poverty rates and homelessness rates have pretty much remained stagnant or flat. What I wanted to get to was to go around and talk to individuals who were homeless and sort of find out how the system's working for them, what their day-to-day life is like, and discover whether or not they sort of interact with the culture around them differently than those individuals giving out benefits. So the big question I pose to audiences a lot to sort of digest this a little bit is when we talk about welfare programs, we're talking about Congress creating budgets to give out to individuals who are currently impoverished. And if Congress is handing out these benefits, who are the individuals that Congress is talking to? So the big question becomes is, when's the last time we saw a person who was homeless testify in front of Congress about his or her experiences? People who are receiving these benefits, who are on these different welfare programs, never have a voice in the conversation. The book, Homeless: Narratives from the Streets, works through a few different parts. The first part actually takes place in Camden, New Jersey, which is where I lived about 10 years ago with an organization, a volunteer organization. I lived there for a year and volunteered at homeless shelters and after-school programs. Throughout that year, I got to know individuals who are homeless. I slept out on the streets with some of them. I sort of was invited into many of their spaces, places like tent cities, alleys, vacant houses. Second section of this book really gets into the academic bulk of sort of the overall literature of what's going on. Throughout this section of the book, we look at different case studies, we look at different welfare programs or charity programs that have been set up over the years in order to sort of alleviate homelessness. And what we find in a lot of these different either community, state, local, federal programs or initiatives is that we invest a lot of money into these programs, and at the end of these endeavors, rates have rarely changed. So what I want to do is actually go on the ground and start talking to people who are homeless about their experiences in the welfare program. So the bulk of this interview section of the research took place in Carbondale, Illinois, which is where I received my PhD at Southern Illinois University. I went around and I interviewed people who were homeless in Carbondale, Illinois, and I talked to them about their experiences. I talked to them about how they became homeless, and the big question that I posed to them is if they could change the welfare system, what sort of changes would they need to make to the welfare system in order to really sort of help them get out of homelessness. I ended up creating this sort of larger through narrative, and so the second half of the book is a sort of this larger narrative about how people move through homelessness. So the first section is about loss. It's called Losing Everything. So people talk about losing their jobs, losing family, losing these personal connections, their support systems, losing their privacy. The second section is about managing the welfare system. I call it navigating the system. So people who are homeless, who don't know, who have never used the welfare system before, it becomes very difficult for them to figure out what sort of programs they need to use. It becomes very difficult for them to navigate the system. Currently, at any given time, there's about 126 different programs people can enroll in, and it's just overwhelming. People don't know where to go or where to turn or which ones are actually going to be beneficial to them. The next section is what I titled Manipulating the System. So because the system's so complicated, a lot of people who are homeless talk about how they deliberately manipulate the system. Now, I don't use any sort of moral judgment against individuals who manipulate the system, but what I sort of use this section of the book for, when I talk to individuals who say that they openly sell food stamps, they lie on housing applications, they lie when it comes to charities and panhandling signs, what I sort of use these stories as is to sort of discuss how disconnected individuals who are housed and the politicians who hand out benefits are very disconnected from the people who are homeless and receiving the benefits. So if the system is so messed up that the individuals who are receiving the benefits feel like they have to manipulate the system in order to get what they need out of it, then obviously the system isn't working. And then the final section is about seeking recognition and finding community, how they want to go about getting a job or getting reconnected with their family. And this whole idea of they just want to be seen, they just want to be listened to, and they just want to be heard. Some of my larger implications for the study include just that with regard to narrative. Again, we focused a lot on the economics and the numbers as far as how many people are homeless versus how much money we are sort of expending on these different programs. And I argue that we need to start collecting narratives and listening to those individuals a lot more frequently. They need to be allowed to testify in front of Congress. We should bring them to city council meetings. They need to be on community boards. They need to be in these spaces with academics and policymakers with regard to sort of telling this larger story about poverty and homelessness in America.